Took this AK underfolder apart, cleaned it up, it's pretty good inside. Put the trigger assembly back in. I'm getting ready to put the actual underfolder back on, so I figured I might as well film it. First things first, going to start with the center support piece to kind of clean this all up. Putting just a light layer of rig grease on here. Normally not a big fan of putting grease on a lot of things, but due to the size and the amount of surface area, I figured it'd be a good idea. We'll take our swing swivel. Also kind of grease that up. Just a light layer because of the movement surfaces. This kind of goes on our center support, kind of self-explanatory. Those notches fit in there. And when we insert it, bear in mind these pen holes, there's large holes and small holes. I've been tending to use the large holes to put my pens through because of the tightness of the pins. This particular rifle was originally made for a left-handed shooter, so the push button was mounted on the right side. With that in mind, there's only slots on this side for that third pin, so when you flipped it around to the right side, missing a pin. So the pin's not nearly important as the other two pins, but I will get around to replacing that pin sooner or later. So we'll start with our, I'll call it the internal locking lug. This hole looks a little bit bigger than this one, so I'm going to go ahead and put this hole facing up. Kind of get it started in here. There, so that's locking lug is sticking out. Again, just a little light amount of grease on the surface. The bearing surfaces there. Slap this side on here. Throw our locking lugs if it'll. It's easy obviously to assemble this with the stock out. It's pretty much the way you want to do it, as opposed to having it folded up. That way you know you got everything put in right. Alright, take our center support. Slide it all the way through. You'll notice we got the slot pointed up, hole pointed up. That hole right there is where I would be putting a pin through. But since I don't have that pin, I'm not going to have to worry about it until I get a replacement pin sometime. Alright, we clean this up real good. Just going to kind of grease that as well. As you can see, there's all sorts of little holes around that. That's where our second pin will go, or in my case, my first pin. Gonna snug this up. Not to be too tight. There's a hole straight through there. I can see everything, so I'm gonna stop where I'm at. Doesn't really affect the wobble per se. The wobble is more of a function of the snugness of those locking lugs. The internal locking lug and the internal locking lug. I'm going to get this started just so I can put my pin in. Alright, not sure which one of these pins I should use here. I got two to choose from, like I said. I'll go ahead and try this one here. Backed it off a bit. Use a punch. So I'm not banging everything out. Right now it's just about flush. You can actually recess it a little bit because the pin's not as long as this hole is, or nut is, at least in my case. There. It's pretty snug. That's our external locking lug and our internal locking lug. Alright, got all that put together. Got our cleaned up spring. Either side can go in, or pretty much the same every way you look at it. And if you look through there, you can see our push button has a hole in it. We want to line that hole up with our hole right there into our slot. Obviously, it's going to be a lot harder to hold it and do that, so we'll try to get the pin started. And the external lock or internal locking lug first. Find my hole. I think we got it in there. Start to hammer it in. You see, when we push the pin, it actuates the internal and external locking lugs, which lets us engage and disengage. Was a lot smoother, or it's a lot smoother now than it was for me before, because before I had to, when it spun, it wouldn't automatically catch every time, but now it's catching pretty good. And just another quick example of how this was a left-handed. In order to take this out later on, that last pin I drove in requires that you punch the pin out from the bottom. As you can see here, oops. This was the hole that was in it prior. I had to put this hole into it after, because it was left-handed mounted. I didn't line the holes up too good, but you can see the outline of the pistol grip that'll cover it up no matter what. Plus that hole's a little bit smaller than that one. But this was to knock the pin out for a left-hand side mount with the push button on this side. But I had to put it around another hole in here to knock it out from the right side. So I'm going to go ahead and put her back together, and we'll see how it functions.